G'day geeks, my name is Chris and this is my first video of 2025, so I thought I'd mix things up a bit and film in a different spot in my toy room so you can see a slightly different angle with some of the toys behind me, and also a slightly different content for this video as well. So we're not talking toys, we're talking comics. So I've been a comic collector since well before I was a teenager, so 30 plus years really. And recently I hung out with Ryan from Ryan the Collector Kid. So he's got a wonderful YouTube channel and a very impressive collection of Doctor Who, Ghostbusters, action figures. He's big into his video games and he's got an impressive collection. So we managed to hang out, which is awesome, as we know each other from the Nexus Toy Fair. And yeah, he showed me a few of his favourite haunts, a few of his favourite spots up north near his neck of the woods, and it was a delightful time. So the first stop was at Collector Zone in Clarkson, and I'll put a link down on the description below to see where you can find them. But they've got a very impressive collection of not only primarily modern action figures, but a huge range of comic back issues as well. So I don't go up there often, so it's a bit of a trek for me. I think I've only been there 3 or maybe 4 times, but I'm going to show you some of the stuff that I managed to pick up. I could spend all day looking through their back issue bins. I didn't spend too long this time, but I did manage to spot a few cool things. So first up we have a classic cover. This is a Detective Comics 587 from 1988, and this is a wonderful Norm Breyfogle. He's one of my favourite 80s and 90s comic artists. So yeah, there's recently a McFarlane figure statue based on this figure actually, with the sweeping cape and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting just reading this again. Jeanette Kahn, who was the publisher and president at the time, she talks in the she's got a letter column here, and she talks about the Watchmen script, the Watchmen film script, which obviously didn't happen in the late 80s. And she also talks about the 1989 Batman film script, which she is very excited, and she mentions that Robin is in it. So yeah, I love those kind of old letters pages and old editor columns and that kind of stuff. A lot of insights into where the comics were at the time. So yes, here's a classic Detective Comics 587 cover. I saw this at, I think this was at Cash Converters actually, maybe one of our stops at Cash Converters. And this was released in 2021 in anniversary, 60-year anniversary. So this is the Fantastic Four life story, issue number 1, the 60s, and every issue of this mini-series was a different decade. So there's also a Spider-Man life story which follows the same format, so it follows the characters as they age in real time. So yes, this is issue 1 is the 60s, issue 2 is the 70s, issue 3 is in the 1980s, and so on. So we've got the Fantastic Four film coming in July, and that's also, we know, is set in the 60s. So I thought, I saw this cover, I'm going to grab it. It's the second of 2 series that DC Comics published in the 80s. This was released in 1982 was the first one, which was a promo comic released in conjunction with the Atari 2600, which I think was my first gaming console. And this is released from 1984 and not related to that initial series. 20 issues were released, and it's got art by the wonderful Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. I've mentioned him a few times in videos before. He's basically the epitome of the 1980s DC Comics house style, or style at the time, with the style guide coming out at the moment as well, which I'm hoping to get my hands on, but it doesn't ship internationally, unfortunately. And there's some awesome toy ads in here as well, which I'll show you. But yes, so this is issue 1 of Atari Force. I've had this on my pull list for a while actually, on my wish list, so I'm very glad that I managed to see Atari Force number 1. So this is from Atlas Seaboard Comics, which only lasted from 1974 to 1975, so a short-lived publisher. And this was the only issue of this particular series they released, Barbarians, featuring Iron Jaw. So Iron Jaw had his own series produced by Atlas Seaboard as well, and he only lasted, I think, maybe 2, 3 or 4 issues. So yeah, Atlas Seaboard, not a very well-known publisher at all, but yeah, and the cover is a bit scratched, you can see, but I don't have anything from Atlas Seaboard, so I wanted to get something from them in my collection. It's an interesting piece of comics history. Speaking of kind of independent publishers, I guess, so this is from Eclipse Comics. I've got a few Eclipse comics in my collection, but this is the first issue of Scorpio Rose. And the interesting thing about this is it's actually got a letter all about the new paper stock that they have, the Baxter paper. You know, paper is a big thing. I remember in the 90s as well, like glossy paper, matte paper, shiny paper, thick paper, premium paper. It's almost like a selling point. So they mentioned Baxter paper. And, you know, even from the 80s, this still holds up. It's actually good paper quality. There's also a very interesting letter in here from the writer of this issue, I believe, Steve Englehart, and he talks about how DC Comics kind of screwed him over and stuff. As I said, the letters and the letters columns, which I don't really do anymore in comic books, unfortunately, talk a lot about this kind of behind the scenes kind of stuff, and a lot of them are quite open and quite honest. It's quite interesting to see. So here we go, Scorpio Rose from Eclipse Comics #1. Nothing too special here, just a thick double-sized issue of Conan the Barbarian from Marvel Comics. This is the first issue, and it's also got a little short story as well in here, a non-illustrated short story. So yeah, I do have a few Conan the Barbarian comics in my collection, and Marvel have been publishing them on and off for years and years and years. But yes, this is probably the most recent comic I have in this batch. So here we go, Conan the Barbarian #1 from Marvel. Thrilling adventure stories. I mean, that title just grabbed me. This is another one from Atlas Seaboard from 1975. Only produced 2 issues of this, Thrilling Adventure Stories. It's in kind of rough shape, but again, I've got a bit of a soft spot for kind of unusual and rare or, you know, not well-known comics. So yeah, this is basically a 68-page black and white kind of magazine format anthology with a bunch of different stories in there, all of them kind of action oriented. It's also got a look at the Doc Savage film, and also a Lawrence of Arabia comic, which is interesting to see. So yes, Thrilling Adventure Stories #1 from Atlas Seaboard. 2 issues here of GI Combat. So these are from 1981, 1982, and these are basically just rare DC kind of war. I do have a soft spot for obscure DC kind of war or western or, you know, horror-y kind of comics. So yes, this is a pretty obscure GI Combat, and so not GI Robot, who's in the Creature Commandos, but GI Combat, and this is basically an anthology series. And the back issue of this one has a ad or a bit of a brief look at different types of German holsters in warfare. So it's quite interesting. But yes, obscure DC war titles, GI Combat. Speaking of obscure DC war and horror kind of titles, this is Weird War Tales from 1974, and the interesting thing about this is it's got an ad for the Big Jim line of action figures. And for those of you that know your Masters of the Universe history, you'll know that the Big Jim line, also from Mattel, was quite instrumental, I guess, in a lot of ways. It's kind of a through line for Big Jim to Motu, Masters of the Universe. They used a lot of some of the same molds and that kind of thing. So I was pretty surprised and happy to see a Big Jim ad in here. But yes, this kind of fits in with my obscure DC Comics titles collection. I also have a soft spot for obscure Christian comics, and this certainly fits the bill. So this is The Hiding Place, which is a famous story from Corrie ten Boom, her and her sister during the Holocaust, and all the trials that she suffered, and how she remained steadfast in her faith. And so yes, this is quite a bit of a classic literature, and this comic adapts the classic The Hiding Place story. It's been around for decades, also a film and stuff. So yeah, pretty interesting. I had to grab this when I saw it, The Hiding Place. I'm also a sucker for Christmas covers, so no matter whenever I see a Christmas cover, I grab it. So I've got, I don't know, probably like 20 or 30 different Santa Claus or Christmas or Christian related Christmas comics. So this is a Sergeant Rock one. This is Home for Christmas, so this is a Sergeant Rock number 350. And yeah, classic DC Comics hero, obviously. So Sergeant Rock, hide behind a snowman. Sticking with the obscure DC titles, this is Warlord. from the 80s, and this is a fantasy kind of line. Never really took off, but there was a line of action figures from Remco, or at least just Warlord, I think, got his own action figure. But this is kind of barbarian fantasy, kind of related to Stranger in a Strange Land kind of thing. But yeah, Warlord, he has a cool costume, and that horse that he's sitting on kind of reminds me of another Masters of the Universe steed as well. So another Warlord for my collection. Sam Keith, the creator of the Maxx, has a very distinctive art style. So the Maxx is a bit of a 90s staple. And he doesn't do a heck of a lot, writer artist Sam Keith, but here the Maxx, his most famous creation, is teaming up with Batman, and it's pretty psychedelic and trippy, the art inside. And so I think this was another find from Cash Converters. Detective Comics 574 from 1987, so written by Mike W. Barr, with art by Alan Davis and Paul Neary, frequent contributors. And this is Batman holding a wounded Jason Todd in his arm. So the Jason Todd is the second Robin, and he later became Red Hood. But yeah, it's quite interesting. Like when I saw this cover, I thought I've got to grab that, because the year after this, in 1988, the Death in the Family storyline ran in DC Comics, where Jason Todd actually died in a very similar pose to this. So I don't know if that was planning or foreshadowing. But yeah, I'm pretty surprised this cover was there, and quite happy to grab it. So another interesting piece of DC Batman history. Last three comics, and all DC. This is from 1989, and this is Action Comics Weekly, when the long-running title Action Comics was weekly. So this is quite a famous Wild Dog cover. He's kind of, I guess you could see him as like DC's version of Punisher in some ways, but he actually appeared in the Arrow TV show Wild Dog with his hockey mask and all that kind of stuff, and hockey jersey. So this is a pretty well-known cover, and I thought I've got to grab that. So there we go. So Action Comics Weekly from DC. Another classic cover. This is Action Comics when it was no longer weekly, just monthly. This is from 1989. You don't see a lot of dark Superman stories. But there is one inside this, and the cover is just very striking. I love it. So this is a great cover, and interior art by the late great George Perez. So very happy to grab this for only $5. So yes, Action Comics number something or other. Anyway, Action Comics with the dark Superman cover. Love it. From 1985, this is Amethyst, the Princess of Gemworld, in her debut issue. And it's not her first appearance, but it's her first issue of her monthly title. And this is, I realise, a bit of another obscure DC hero or heroine. There's a lot of obscure DC in this selection, but that's kind of where my heart lies when it comes to comic collecting. And the other thing you may notice is a lot of these are direct edition comics. So you'll see in the little logo and the bottom right corner, barcodes are usually reserved for newsagents and that kind of thing. But direct editions for comic shops primarily don't have barcodes, but they normally have like some artwork or little thing in the corner there. So if we look at the last couple, you can see that they've all got the kind of little corner stamp there. So yeah, that just shows that they're direct edition. So these would have been sold directly at comic shops rather than newsagents. So there we go. That's a few of my all of the haul that I got from Collector Zone primarily in Joondalup, and they're actually holding a stall in March of this year. I'll put the details on screen right now. So I go to the Nexus Toy Fair, and it's a very similar fair up north if you live that way. So there we go. Thanks to Ryan for joining me on my comic collecting hunt. Got some pretty good stuff here. Also from Collector Zone, here's all the details of where they are. I definitely recommend you going and checking them out if you're interested in comics and toys. Also from Collector Zone, I picked up a couple of display cases for some of my action figures, which I've wanted to do for quite a while. So these are just kind of the smaller retro style plastic cases. They're only $4 each, but they just help protect and look good on display. So I threw a couple of my figures in there, carded figures. So this is just a Star Wars. You'll notice it says Revenge of the Jedi instead of Return of the Jedi. Revenge of the Jedi was the initial name for the third film in the Star Wars original trilogy. So this is a modern figure. It's not really worth anything, and the card itself is quite bowed. You can see I need to flatten it out, but it's pretty cool. It looks pretty cool. Just fits in there very snugly. So yes, I got 2 of these. So that's for one of my cases, and they do fit the Super 7 reaction line of figures as well. And I had an old Starcom carded figure which I bought at Nexus Toy Fair, I think last year, maybe the year before. And again, it fits in here very well and just adds a bit of layer of protection. So these plastic C3 cases just come flat packed, easy enough to assemble, and they come in different sizes. So I'm pretty glad that I grabbed a couple of those. We also made our way out of Collector Zone, and as I said, Ryan and I went to a few different op shops and went to the Tamala Park reuse shop, where I picked up a cool VCR DVD combo. So I've been after a VCR for quite some time now, because my VHS collection is probably about 20-30 VHS, I guess, but I don't actually have a VCR. So now that I do have one, so I was pretty happy to find that for $25 at the Tamala Park reuse shop. And also at Cash Converters, I found a couple of Skylanders, pretty cute little figures. Again, these were only, I think, $5 or $6, and I use these for Dungeons & Dragons because they're kind of cute little minis and they scale well. And my players always seem to like them when I put up some cute little things, and I can often write a story around the minis, which is what I normally do when I write Dungeons & Dragons stories. I look at the stuff around in this room for kind of inspiration, what I can use. So these will show up at some point in my new D&D campaign with my lovely players. So there we go, quite an assortment of cool things for sure. Thanks again to Ryan the Collector Kid. Make sure you give him a like and follow on YouTube and Instagram. And it was such a great day just hanging out with a good mate and going up shopping and discovering comics and toys and video games and all that kind of stuff. So thank you, Ryan, for showing me around, and yeah, very happy with the little haul I've got here. So until the next one, goodbye, geeks.